Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Dune in June, a new BookTube event created by Sean D. Standfast and hosted by a bunch of great people, where we're reading Frank Herbert's Dune in the month of June, breaking it down into 3 parts, with the 4th part being The Impossible Dream, sung by Richard Kiley on the Broadway stage. For part number 1 of Dune is also called Dune, and that is the first week that we're closing out right now for Dune in June. Then part number 2 of the book and part number 2 of Dune in June is Muad'Dib. And then part number 3 is The Prophet. And then part number 4 of Dune in June will be discussions of the various video adaptations of this work. I will probably discuss the appendices as well. There are appendices at the end of this thing that have some interesting bits in them. And the goal for that 4th week would, of course, be that all the co-hosts would get together to do a live discussion, which you could join in. We could all talk about all things Dune. That is, of course, not going to happen. Schedules will not allow that, but we'll try. I'll dream. I will certainly do some video like that in the 4th week. But I've been concentrating this first week, on the mental effect this book has on a lot of people. People who've never read it, but who've heard about it nonstop. It's universally acclaimed as one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, but it's big and complicated. It hits the ground running in the middle of a complicated story. It's easy to start reading this and think, I'm not being given enough breadcrumbs here to know where I am. Now, I think it's easy to feel that way. I don't think that's justified. I want to stress here the point that I've made in a few videos, that I'm not knocking Frank Herbert as a writer. He actually does handle all of this material perfectly. In the same way that the authors of most books that have a reputation for being intimidating actually do handle their material just fine. You do not need any preparation for War and Peace, for instance. But nevertheless, some people feel that they do. And I love talking about this book anyway. I've been reading it forever. So my videos this week have been demystifying in nature. I did a primer on this book where I give you the premise, the whole big premise of the story, leading you right up to the doorstep of the actual plot of this book. So I didn't do any spoilers, but I tell you all the moving parts and pieces in an attempt to clarify them enough so that you don't feel like you're plunging into an alien ocean when you dive into this book. And I also did a primer video on the core cast of characters so that you know who they are and who to pay attention to, and something about them. And then, as a kind of follow-up to all of that, this week I have been doing close readings of the opening chapters of this book. Dune doesn't actually have numbered chapters, but it has small sections that are essentially chapters. They aren't numbered or anything, so it's a little bit difficult to navigate them. I've been navigating them by the lines they open with. I've been going through a close reading of those chapters also as a way to both talk about this book and demystify its earliest experience, the earliest exposures to it that you're going to have. I don't think that I could keep doing that. I certainly can't keep doing that on the time frame of Dune in June, which is just the month of June. It would take too long. If I did a video every day, it would still take too long. I don't know if I want to continue to do that instead of maybe jumping around. Maybe instead of doing a chapter-by-chapter close reading, in the 2nd week of Dune in June, when we move on to Muad'Dib, maybe I should do a close reading of the first few chapters of that part of the book, and leave the rest of the first part for you to read on your own. But for today, and maybe tomorrow, we can continue with these close readings. We are up to, we are on the planet Caladan, a lush, green water world that is the home base of the family Atreides. They've lived there for a long time. They're not a big, rich house, but they are well-established and noble, and their leader, Duke Leto Atreides, is the unofficial spokesman of the Landsraad. He's the unofficial spokesman of a lot of the great houses who look to him for leadership, not only because he's distantly related to the Emperor, but also because he's seen as trustworthy and noble, and the Emperor, by implication, is not. And plenty of other houses are not only not trustworthy and not noble, but villainous, like House Harkonnen, the previous owners of Dune, the fiefdom that Duke Leto has been ordered by the Emperor to take over. He's been ordered to pack up his family from Caladan and move to Dune. The Harkonnens are moving out, and he's moving in to take over the running of the planet Arrakis, the planet Dune, which is the source of the spice melange, the only source. Anywhere in the whole of the Imperium. No planet produces it. No laboratory produces it. It cannot be duplicated. It can only be harvested from the sands of Dune. And it's pretty important. It's not only intensely addictive, millions of people are addicted to it, and also genuinely geriatric. It can prolong your life enormously. But it also is the grease to the wheels of the quasi-supernatural, super physical abilities of the Bene Gesserit, for instance, an all-female society that we have seen in all of our previous chapters, to which the Lady Jessica, the wife of Duke Leto Atreides, and the lead concubine of Duke Leto Atreides, he never actually marries her, but he loves her and no one else. And she's also the mother of his heir, Paul Atreides, the star of the book. She's a member of the Bene Gesserit and has had direct experience with the wonders that spice can do, although not the ultimate Bene Gesserit spice experience. She will experience that, but not in the way that she would ever guess. But also, far more importantly, an interplanetary galactic society is only made possible by faster-than-light travel. It isn't possible otherwise. And Frank Herbert knows this, of course. Every science fiction author knows this. So he has a spacing guild. And they are a guild in the strictest sense of the term, in that they don't allow their secrets to be used anywhere else. No one else has space travel, just the guild. And you pay them to go from planet to planet, and they are scrupulously neutral. As we're told in the chapter that we're reading today, the spaceships of two rival houses who hate each other could be berthed right next to each other in a gigantic guild spaceship, and you would never even know it. There would never be any trouble. Because if you make trouble for the guild, they'll revoke your spacing privileges, and suddenly you're not able to go to your various worlds. You're not able to conduct any kind of commerce between worlds. You're stuck on one planet. So interplanetary and inter-system travel is very important in this book. It's crucial. And it's only done by the guild. And the guild can only do it if they can plot the course of their faster-than-light ships that go into no space and then come back out again. A folded kind of space that covers vast numbers of light years in a small amount of time. The only way that they can do that is if they can plot that course, so that when your ship comes back out of folded or no or hyperspace or whatever, it doesn't land in the middle of an asteroid field like it does in Star Wars, or a star or a planet. And in Herbert's conception here, the way that the guild navigators do that is with prescience. They're actually looking into the future to determine which of those lines of travel are safe for their faster-than-light spaceships. And the only reason that they're able to do that is the spice. The spice has mutated guild navigators to the point where they can extend their awareness into the future. They can be prescient and tell what that path will be, what it must be to be safe. If the guild weren't safe, well, then not only would there not be an intergalactic empire, but of course no one would use them if they weren't safe. Again, this is all an exponent of something called the Butlerian Jihad, which Frank Herbert never gives us. He never describes what it is. He just tells us what it is. Centuries-old prohibition against advanced computers, AI. Of course, if you have accurate interstellar information, if you have accurate astronomical information about other solar systems, asteroid fields, gravimetric fields of one kind or another, if you have lots and lots of accurate information about those things, you can plot a safe course for a guild highliner using AI, but it's absolutely forbidden in this world. So you have, if you need a computer, you have a human trained up to be a computer called a Mentat. And if you need a navigational computer, a Navcom, you use a guild navigator. And they use the spice. If they didn't have the spice, they couldn't do it. So it's pretty important. The fiefdom that Duke Leto has been ordered to take over from the House Harkonnen is pretty important. And a little odd that the Emperor would order the change and that House Harkonnen would meekly agree. In other words, it's a trap. And Duke Leto knows it's a trap. He doesn't have any choice. As far as he's concerned, he has no choice but to walk into it. And the only other choice, really, that he seems to contemplate would be going rogue. Take his whole family, all their ships, all their atomic weapons, all their people, and leave the Imperium, go out to the outskirts of known and settled space, and live there as a rogue house. Duke Leto is too proud for that, so he doesn't want to do it. The other alternative is a little bit unclear to me. I know it has a simple answer, and the simple answer is prominent in the chapter that we're reading today. The other alternative seems to me to be just to refuse, for Duke Leto to say, no, I'm not going to leave Caladan. I'm not going to go to Dune. I'm not going to walk into a trap. My answer is no. You've ordered me to change planets. I refuse. The simple solution to that is the Sardaukar. The Emperor has, in addition to normal levied troops of his own, he also has super troops, super killers, called the Sardaukar, who are the most feared soldiers in the Imperium. And I guess the implication of you could just refuse is if you do, the Emperor will swat you. He'll crush you with his own legions if you don't do what he says. Okay, all right. Well, we don't have to delve into that. It's important only to know that Duke Leto doesn't think that he has an alternative, and also it's important to know that is the cudgel that the Emperor wields, the Sardaukar, these super soldiers of his that come from the planet Seleucia Secundus, that no one seems to know anything about except that it's rumored to be a hellhole. It's rumored to be a horrible place, which is the perfect place where you would train soldiers who end up being harder and tougher than anyone else. But all the early chapters that we've been reading so far in Dune have taken place on the planet Caladan, not on the planet Dune. We haven't got to Dune yet. We've been to Caladan, and we've taken a brief detour to a horrible planet called Gedi Prime, which is the homeworld of the Harkonnens. But we haven't been to Dune yet. The family's getting ready. They're packing up all their stuff. They're preparing to move to Dune. Duke Leto, his lady Jessica, his foremost assistants, his mentat, Thufir Hawat, his war masters, Gurney Halleck. Duncan Idaho is already gone. We haven't met him yet. And also Paul. Paul is also getting ready. He is still getting lessons from Dr. Yua, the family physician, who we already know is going to betray them and become a black name in history as a traitor. Paul is he's decided to get ready, but he hasn't left yet. And he also hasn't left the scene of the action. The scene of these last couple of chapters is the same. It's a training room where Paul is he's just there. He was training, then he talks with Gurney Halleck, and he talks with Thufir Hawat. Then he has masseurs come in. We don't see that scene, but he is worked over by professional massagers. And then Dr. Yua comes in and talks to him just briefly and then leaves, tells him that his father is looking for him and that his father is going to come. And that's the chapter that we're looking at today, is we finally meet Duke Leto, who comes to this training room to talk with his son. They haven't had a chance to talk much because everything's been upended by the need to travel. And in this chapter, Paul is conflicted because he has already heard from the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit and also from his own mother that there is a trap on Arrakis, and that no matter what else happens, Duke Leto, his father, will not survive. For the father, nothing. This is horrifying to a teenage boy. And he wants to tell his father. He seems compelled not to. Something that the Reverend Mother has done with the voice seems to have stopped him from being able to just lay this all out explicitly. But it doesn't matter, because in this chapter we're quickly made aware that Duke Leto knows. He knows all the stuff that's being said. And he also knows that it's a trap. And he also knows the exact nature of the trap. When we move the scenes to Gedi Prime and we get a scene with Baron Harkonnen, we are told the scheme, which is that House Atreides will be lured to Dune, and House Harkonnen will strike at them through the actions of a traitor, Dr. Yua, aided by 2 legions of Sardaukar in Harkonnen livery, so that no one knows that the Emperor is helping to extinguish a royal house. We're told that plot. That is the plot that Baron Harkonnen's mentat dreams up. And in this chapter, the one that we're reading now, where Duke Atreides finally meets his son and they talk a bit, the Duke is saying that. He tells us outright, yeah, I expect that there'll be violence and that it'll be Sardaukar in Harkonnen livery. So he knows the whole detail of it. He is just assuming that he can find a way out of it. Paul actually asks him at one point in this chapter, well, if we know all of this and it's this bad, why do it? Why walk into this trap? And Duke Leto snaps at him and says, well, knowing a trap is the first, knowing that it exists is the first step to defeating it, to diffusing it. We'll find a way. And Duke Leto has an idea. He has a way. It's an idea that Paul's own intuitive mind, his own precocious precognitive abilities, have twigged just a bit. But the Duke says it outright in this chapter. Seleucus Secundus, the homeworld of the Sardaukar, is known for being a hellhole, and it produces tougher men than any other soldiers in the Imperium. Dune is a hellhole. It's a horrible place. Outside of the marginal living conditions scraped together in towns and outposts, the people of the desert, the deserts of this world, are as punishing as any world in the Imperium. And people live there. The Fremen, the native people of Dune, live there. They live out in the deep desert. The Harkonnens think nothing of them. They think they're a tiny fragment band, and they hunt them for sport. Thufir Hawat, Duke Atreides Mentat, has already told Paul, and thereby extension us, that there are a lot more Fremen than the Harkonnens think. As he will say much later in this book, you spread your population on such a planet. He thinks there are a lot more of these people out there, and we learned that Duke Leto has sent Duncan Idaho, a master swordsman, a ruthless man, as an emissary to the Fremen. He hasn't sent Duncan with the rest of the shock troops to flood the sieges and villages with propaganda about the good Duke. He hasn't sent Duncan Idaho to the palace at Arrakis to defuse any Harkonnen traps or make sure that the landing bays are all clear and that all the equipment works. Duncan Idaho is not involved in any reconnaissance like that. He has instead been sent to the Fremen as an emissary. And we learn why. Because Duke Leto is thinking, well, if Dune is that horrible a place, maybe I could recruit a military force from the Fremen. And maybe they would be as fierce or more than the Sardaukar from Seleucus Secundus. He drops a couple of those hints in the conversation he has with Paul. One of the elements in this conversation that I do not understand. Paul worships his father, of course, and admires him. But in this chapter, explicitly lies to him. And I've never been able to figure out a reason for that. Not telling him about some of the worst Bene Gesserit pronouncements about his fate, that seems to be something that the Reverend Mother has made Paul do. That she has used the voice to inhibit, to put an inhibition in Paul so that he can't speak about it openly. But lying to his father about something else, another subject, that I don't understand. At one point in this chapter, Duke Leto asked Paul, did Thufir Hawat talk to you about Seleucus Secundus? And Paul says no, when in fact, not only did Hawat talk to him about Seleucus Secundus, but Frank Herbert gives us that conversation. It's weird that Paul would lie like that. But we now see part of the way that Duke Leto is hoping to elude the trap that he knows he's walking into. And that is to recruit the Fremen. To train a battalion of Fremen as his own personal warriors. He knows the teeth of the problem of the trap that he's walking into. The teeth of the problem is not that the Harkonnen mean him ill. He knows this. He's always known this. And he trusts that his people can handle the Harkonnen military forces. The thing he doesn't think is that his people can handle the Sardaukar. And ordinarily, he wouldn't need to worry about that because the last thing the Emperor wants is for any of the great houses to think that he can just send in his stormtroopers to pick them off one by one. It might lead to a whole bunch of them banding against him. So he doesn't do this. That's why it has to be done covertly. The Duke knows that the key element in the trap that he's walking into will be those covert Sardaukar forces. And he's thinking, well, if I can delay the closing of the trap just long enough, I can train up some Fremen as a countermeasure to that and have an incredible advantage that I didn't have before. The biggest advantage of all, he doesn't see. And we as readers don't see it either, not completely. The biggest advantage of all, of course, is the spice. You're moving to the only place in the whole universe where spice exists. In this chapter, we are told that Combe, a gigantic multi-conglomerate financial institution in this future universe, controls the spice. I always get what comb is an abbreviation for the separate words. I always get them wrong, so I want to get them right this time around. What is comb? The Combine Haunet Ober Advancer Mercantiles. That is comb. CHOAM. In this chapter, Duke Leto says, well, it's not a simple procedure, but basically comb controls the spice. And every family has their allotments and they buy what they can. And in this chapter, Paul and the Duke admit that families stockpile spice. It's kind of hinted that that's illegal. But in any case, whether it is or not, we're told that families stockpile spice against the day when someone may fail to harvest enough spice, or that comb may raise its prices, much like OPEC, something like that. Comb is, I think, clearly a 1960s reflection of OPEC, which you might not, if you're born in the 21st century, you might not even know what OPEC is, but you can Google it. It's once upon a time, it ruled the world, much in the way that comb is said to do here. But as we're going to learn later in this book, one of the key elements at the conclusion of this book is that, well, to quote from the book, he who controls a thing, he who can destroy a thing, controls it. Comb distributes the spice and it markets the spice, but it doesn't produce spice. The spice only comes from one place. The Duke doesn't seem to see that, and we are clearly fainted away from seeing that too, in favor of concentrations on military forces. Can the Duke make favorable overtures to the Fremen out in the wastes of Dune? So that is this chapter. There is one MacGuffin in this chapter, a bit of a red herring. The Duke, and that's also largely abandoned as the book goes on. The Duke comes with news for Paul. He's not just checking in to see how his son is doing. He has news. Thufir Hawat and Lady Jessica think that Paul might have mentat abilities of his own. Paul is stunned by this revelation. He has always been told that mentats are discovered in childhood and trained almost from infancy, and that he's far too old to receive mentat training. But the Duke says otherwise, that you might have this ability, you might want to think about it. We will need to pursue it once we have once all this chaos is behind us and we are settled on our new world. And the Duke leaves, and Paul is thinking, we've been told the narrative about Paul has said that he is haunted by a terrible purpose. His prescient dreams of the future always seem to be brushing up against a terrible purpose, something incredibly large and ominous in his future that he can't see, but he can feel it. And for a brief moment at the end of this chapter, he wonders, well, maybe that's it. That maybe the terrible purpose is that I am going to be a mentat. But he knows right away, even while he's thinking it, he knows it's not true. That's nothing. Compared to the size of his terrible purpose, that's nothing. And if you're familiar with not only this book, the conclusion of this book, but all the other books that Frank Herbert wrote about Dune, you know that, no, that's a drop in the bucket. The terrible purpose is much, much bigger than that. But that's it. That's how the chapter ends. The Duke raises the possibility that maybe we should get you mentat training, and then he walks off. And the preparations are right on a knife edge. Everyone's leaving Caladan for Dune. So, if you're reading this book for the first time and you're thinking, well, okay, I've read lots of science fiction by less talented authors, so I know what the next chapter will be. No author in the world is going to miss the opportunity to pull out all the stops in describing the passage on a Guild Highliner, describing what it's like. Maybe you've seen one of those video adaptations of this book, all of whom spend a yard's worth of special effects on that passage. You'll be thinking, well, what author isn't going to do that? This author isn't going to do that. He doesn't care about that at all. He doesn't care about those sorts of things in the slightest. So our next chapter, the next one we'll read, if I go on with this, will be on Dune. We don't see the passage. Herbert doesn't describe it. So I'll wrap this up for now. We have finally met Duke Atreides, who is doomed. We've been told over and over again, he is doomed. No reason not to believe it. If you have characters, not only does Frank Herbert have characters absolutely certain of it, but he has characters who can see the future. absolutely certain of it. And also we get those epigraphs at the beginning of every chapter. We get these history books written by this Princess Irulan person, all talking about these things in the decidedly past tense. These are history items, and all talking about the Duke as doomed. So this is not a spoiler. Herbert is not leaving you any hope in the matter. He wants you to see that Duke Leto's optimism, his dogged defiance of the trap, is doomed. He wants that to add to the heroic nature of the man. So we'll wrap up this chapter now. We're continuing with Dune in June. Of course, I want to know, are you reading Dune? Are you rereading Dune for this event? Are you having fun with it? And also, especially, are you reading it for the first time? Any of you? And are you enjoying it? That would be wonderful to hear. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.